With increasing climate modelling and water modelling, there's lots and lots of data that's being produced, and that's been happening over the last decade. But still, the gap between making good decisions and this data is increasing. So we're trying to get to the bottom of how better to use all of this data that's being produced to make better decisions. When I say better decisions, decisions that mean that we've got good water security under a range of plausible futures, because no one knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. But there's all this data that tells us what's plausible for the future, but it's sort of a disconnect between the production of all of that data and using that data to make good decisions. So the project is deliberately targeting decision makers, so the people that have to account for the impacts of climate variability and change when they're making decisions about water security. And so these people typically aren't climate scientists or water modelers, but they're the ones that have to use the outputs from the climate modelling and the water modelling. So what the project produced was we did a review of all of the different approaches that are used to produce this information. So we're talking hundreds of journal papers and more than 50 different approaches in Australia alone of producing this information. So we've reviewed all of that. We've categorised those approaches and weighed up the strengths and weaknesses of those approaches. We're not trying to say which approach is good, which approach is bad or best or worst, because they're all sort of equally valid. What we're trying to do is come up with an objective way of an end user or a decision maker seeing what's best for them. So what suits what's fit for purpose for them, and what gives them the best bang for buck for what it is that they need to do. So there's different applications for this, and depending on what sort of decisions you need to make, then there's different approaches that are going to be more and less suitable for you. The literature review was the first thing. Then we've done some workshops and some case studies. So there's a case study in Wivenhoe in southeast Queensland, another one in Burnett, where we've actually applied all of these different approaches that were identified through those systems, so that you can actually see the differences in what happens, not just the numbers that they produce, but the decisions that might result from those approaches. And then you can backtrack from there and say, right, well, if the decision is going to be the same under all of the approaches, well, it doesn't really make much sense to go with a really sophisticated, expensive approach when you're going to get the same outcome from a simple, quick and easy approach. So we've done that, and we've identified when you can go with the simple, quick and cheap approach versus when you need to invest more money and go with a more sophisticated approach. So it's definitely not one size fits all. There has been a tendency to sort of see something that works elsewhere in overseas or in a different state and say, oh, that sounds good, let's apply that here. But what the main learning is in Queensland in particular, and in different parts of Queensland, the climate impacts differently, the climate variability is different, the drivers of the decision, population and things like that are different. So it doesn't make sense that one size fits all. You have to pick the approach for producing climate information that's fit for purpose for your location and your application.